Another edition of Beat the Closing Number presented by TheLines.com. You can follow The Lines on Twitter at TheLinesUS. You can follow Steven Andres, who's filling in for Moneylines. Follow Steven at Steven Andres1. You can follow me on Twitter at Eli Herskovich. Remember, before we get started, to give the video a thumbs up and ring the bell to get notification. If you're just listening to the audio version, Spotify, Apple, quick 5-star review and leave a review as well. Not just the 5 stars, always helps boost the podcast. Beat the Closing Number. This year, Steven, even though you've only been a part of it for one of our opening odds episodes in a given week, I think it was week 2, something like that, or actually 2. I'll give you more credit. You've been a part of 2 Monday episodes. We are 23-10 on the season with spreads and totals. How did your week 9 go?
About as well as your guys' season has been going. Good bounce back week for me. 7-3 altogether between sides, totals, and teasers. Would like to thank Bryce Young for his 2 pick sixes, which submarined the other teaser I had. But overall, very solid week. Felt really good about the Bengals against the Bills. The only, I think, bad beat potentially we could describe it is the Dallas game against Philadelphia. I was with you guys on Dallas, and maybe we get a little bit more into that. But overall, I felt like all of us as a staff really handicapped the week very well.
Yeah, week 9 for me. We'll get to Eagles, Cowboys in a minute or two. But Commanders, we were all on that. That cashed. Washington wins outright. Buffalo, second half, I took last night as well. Got that.
Solid.
That one got steamed pretty quickly to 6. But either way, every number, Bills number second half wound up covering because of the Stephon Diggs 2-point conversion. And then Cowboys +3. I was very close to betting some live numbers in the second half. I just couldn't pull the trigger. One of them would have cashed, one of them wouldn't have cashed. So it's one of those, in hindsight, it is what it is. But let's discuss that game for a hot second, or 2, or 3, or 10 million.
However long it takes for you to feel better about it.
In fairness, I got a lot of my venting out last night. It was like the photo, the meme where I think it's at an Astros game where the guy is talking to his girlfriend or whoever it is, and she looks very disinterested while he is just spieling about something about the Houston Astros or something about sports. I probably went on like a 10-minute rant to my fiance about Eagles, Cowboys, and
oh, man.
She understood 70% of it because I kind of, not in a mean way, I dumbed it down to where I was explaining, okay, the ball got pushed back X amount of yards. They were X amount of yards away from the end zone. She doesn't watch a ton of sports, so I had to, preface a bunch and keep things simple, which is fair. I don't understand a lot of the things that she discusses, so she prefaces and dumps it down for me.
The beauty is you don't really have to go into too many details when you show the replay of Dak Prescott having I-95 wide lane to the corner of the end zone and then having his foot step out of bounds. Like, anybody of all knowledge levels when it comes to the NFL knows that was dumb. Maybe stay in bounds, and then that last drive with all the penalties wouldn't have mattered because you would have only needed a field goal to go to overtime. Like,
man, I don't. Yeah, that's true. So let's go into the lucky breaks that the Eagles got before we dive into the 4 games and some college basketball stuff on this edition to Beat the Closing Number. So the Eagles recovered all three of their own fumbles. Maybe if you want to say an X team gets positive variance in the fumble department in a given game, you recover 2 of your 3. Not all 3, especially on that last one. Would have been in plus territory for Dallas had they recovered it. It seemed like Parsons or someone on Dallas's defensive line had jumped on the ball initially, and then the ball squirted out. Schoonmaker's touchdown is overturned, rightfully so, but he got held on the play. I know you said it's maybe easier to tell in slow-mo, but that's still a lucky break for the Eagles. It would have been
contact was made before the ball got there.
Right. That's defensive holding for sure. And then the Cowboys' offensive lineman was also penalized 3 plays prior to that. Should be defensive holding on the Pollard touchdown. Cowboys obviously don't score on that possession. 2 of their 3 final possessions inside the 10-yard line, you get 6 points. Just wild. You mentioned the 2-point conversion that was initially called good and then Of course, Prescott's foot on the replay is shown stepping out of bounds. Illegal hands to the face on the Eagles. The flag was thrown. This was on the drive previous to the final possession. Flag gets picked up. Ridiculous. It was clearly hands to the face. And then in the third quarter, on the Eagles, one of the Eagles' 2 touchdown drives, the flag is called on Stephon Gilmore on defensive pass interference when the ball was, I think it was Devonta Smith, clearly over his head, or maybe A.J. Brown. I think it was A.J. Brown. Yet, despite all of that, the game comes down to 5 yards. And I don't know why Prescott didn't throw the ball into the end zone. Maybe he thought Lamb would pitch it back. Who knows? But despite all those lucky breaks that the Eagles got, it still comes down to the final 5 yards of the game. Cowboys were the better team. I don't know how you could come away from that game saying the Eagles are the clear-cut favorite to win the NFC, or that they were the better team in that game even. Just single game, from a single game standpoint. I think Dallas still has a shot to win this division with everything coming up on the Eagles' schedule following the bye. But what say you from your takeaways from the game?
Listen, I was extremely high on the Eagles coming into this season for most of this run through the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season, and then handicapping this game going in. I saw a lot of the same things you and Mo did. I saw red flags, and the game played out that way. And the Eagles' pass defense in particular still has major issues. Dak Prescott threw for 374 yards, 3 touchdowns, and no picks. He
was unbelievable.
He was fantastic. He was 8.5 yards per attempt in this game. And it didn't matter that they only had 3.5 yards per carry. Like that's part of trying to take advantage of. They're a pass funnel defense at this point. On the other side, all my concerns about the Eagles' rushing attack going from world beaters last year, like all-time great rushing offense, better than the vast majority of NFL teams' passing offenses last year, to now being outside the top 20 over the past month, happened again. They only had 3.3 yards per carry in this game against Dallas. Now, credit a little bit where it's due with the Eagles' passing offense being one of the 3 best in the league over the past 5 weeks or so. They've really taken a step forward there with just A.J. Brown being an Offensive Player of the Year candidate. He's been a monster this year, so I almost give the receivers as much credit as I do Jalen Hurts in that department. But everything you said about bad calls going against Dallas's way, yards per play from a box score perspective was very much in favor of Dallas, 5.8 to a below average 4.9 for the Eagles offense.
Hurts' knee wasn't healthy, and that was evident from their first possession.
But I will say he did enough when needed. He still scrambled and was able to get important first downs when needed to run. So it's certainly not 100%, it seems, but it's not hampering him to the point where he can't run at all. Like there was an early run in the second half just to catch the Cowboys, to plant the seed in their mind that he could still run for the rest of that second half after he went into the locker room early at the end of the first half. So I'm with you. I think in the rematch in Dallas, I'd be very surprised if I'm not on Dallas again. And with the really difficult schedule the Eagles have coming up here, despite that fact that they are 2 games up in the loss column now in the NFC East, I don't think this race is over. And once we get to the playoffs, I think the NFC is wide open. I really do. And I might be just shopping for a price at that point. So I think people have buried the 49ers for dead after 3 straight losses. But if they are healthy, and that's a big if, but if healthy at the end of the season, then it might be another year in a row we're actually getting a little bit of a discount on the 49ers going into the postseason, which I would welcome certainly as a better for sure.
If we get San Francisco and Philly an NFC Championship game rematch, you know which side I will absolutely be on.
Oh, well, we're getting it before then because I believe they play week 13. Yep, week 13 in Philadelphia.
Yeah, so just touching on the Eagles' upcoming schedule after the bye, and that's bye week certainly comes at a great time for Philly with Hurts dealing with that knee injury. At Kansas City on Monday Night Football on the 20th. Then Buffalo at home. We know Buffalo's defense got trucked by Joe Burrow and the Bengals passing attack on Sunday night, but still a difficult matchup against an explosive Bills passing offense that left
Just
some
bet
points
the
on the
over
board.
if it starts with a 4. I'll just say that. If they somehow hang a total with a 4 at the beginning of it, just bet the over in Eagles.
I mean,
Bills.
to be fair, though, not that I'm disputing your notion, but could have said the same thing last night in Bengals Bills, and everything that
was rough. That was rough.
Yeah, everything that could have gone
backwards.
wrong for the total went wrong. So we'll see. Then San Francisco, as you mentioned, on the 3rd of December, then at Dallas, at Seattle. No matter how maybe lucky the Seahawks have gotten in their own respect with the schedule, pretty weak schedule. We saw that come into play yesterday on Sunday as we're recording this on Monday, November 6th in Baltimore. Seahawks clearly not up to snuff against the elites of the NFL, despite having a 5-2 record going into that game, destroyed and then some. Geno Smith looking like the Jets version of Geno Smith, and then the Giants. So that is a 4-game stretch that is going to decide playoff seeding in the NFC, or play a big role in deciding playoff positioning and the NFC East. To your point, I don't think it's over. Neither of us do. One more thing I want to mention, just bad officiating, which we kind of touched on with Eagles Cowboys. How about the Commanders game? How about Washington and New England? That was the worst roughing the passer call I've ever seen.
Yeah, I've been saying this on Twitter for like a year and a half, man. We have a league full of billionaires who own these teams, and they only care about hiring freelancers. You know, in our world, like Eli, like, you know, us at the Lines, we put a lot of effort into the people that we bring on as freelancers. They're really good freelancers, but we have to teach them some stuff from time to time, right? Like, this is a $1 billion league, and one of the most important positions that you could hire in your league is the officiating crews. And they're freelancers. They're not full-time positions. They don't have benefits. Like, they have other jobs that they do when they're done officiating a game. It's wild to me that that's the case. And at this point, I'm almost even more upset with the rules experts in the booth in these games, because, you know, the latest example was Sunday Night Football, where it took them about 60 seconds to pull a flag and call intentional grounding on Josh Allen for a grounding situation that I've never seen flagged before. Like, I've been watching football in the NFL all my life, and not once have I ever seen intentional grounding called when there was just a mix-up, a miscommunication between the quarterback and the wide receiver. Either the wide receiver ran the wrong route or the quarterback threw it to the wrong route, one or the other. But that's not grounding. That's a miscommunication that I've never seen called as grounding. And I bet the Bengals. So I'm not biased here. Like, I'm coming to you from just a fan perspective and with experience. And Terry McAuley gets on the mic. Well, let's go to Terry McAuley. Let's see what he thinks. Well, guys, you know, that's always been called grounding. You may not like it, but it's always been called grounding. I'm paraphrasing, but he essentially said that situation has always been called grounding, whether you like it or not, which is not total true. BS. Like, that is garbage. Yeah. Like, you can say now this year it's being emphasized as such, but he didn't say it was being emphasized as such this year. He was saying that in all his years, that's been called grounding, which is nonsense, Eli. So, like, I'm tired of the freelance officials. I'm tired of the rules experts and retired officials having their back in the booth and being afraid to criticize them when they do something wrong on the field. Like, it's enough already. Like, these guys in the booth add nothing to the broadcast if that's the way they're going to approach it. Like, if they're going to act like the brotherhood of umpires in Major League Baseball, then there's no point to having them or listening to them, and they're not making us smarter as fans watching the NFL.
Yeah, I thought watching Joe West and Angel Hernandez was the worst it could get in officiating in sports, but clearly not. Also, like, going back to... And decide
it's grounding faster. Like, they had the whole field goal unit out there ready to kick, and then they threw the flag. Like, Josh Allen's on the bench getting a tablet, getting a cup of water, helmet already on the back, and he comes flying off the bench like, what? Like, you can read his lips. Are you effing kidding me? Like, it took forever ever for them to call that grounding. Like, it's enough already. Like, figure it out. It's nonsense.
Yeah, that was a terrible call. I'm trying to get my swear words out of my system before I have kids. So trying not to swear as much. Could say something worse, but I'm not going to. I do want to go back to the roughing the passer call in Patriots Commanders, because that easily could have played a role in the outcome in the betting, from a betting standpoint or not, because New England gets a field goal on that possession. Also, to your point, the Bills' inability to get a field goal on that possession. Then if Kincaid doesn't fumble, or if they do get a field goal to end the half, Kincaid doesn't fumble on one of their final possessions in the second half, I think third to last possession, then maybe you cover, maybe you win the game. Who knows? I was impressed with Henry, by the way, the rookie defensive end from Clemson. Was brought in, drafted because of his pass rushing prowess, and heck of a move. What else are you supposed to do in that given situation? How else are you supposed to sack Mac Jones? If you want to...
I guess they called body weight on him. Is that why they called it?
Right, but there was truly no...
Yeah, it's nonsense.
There was no other way for him to sack him.
Yeah, it's nonsense.
It doesn't make any sense. If you want to change the game of football, which they are essentially doing by the rule book, fine, but within the rules, I mean, it's not like he's there. That's what it's the same thing as like, what is a catch? What is the definition of body weight on a quarterback? It's a very blurry line. So I could not believe that was called. Even Patriots fans, I know a Commanders reporter, and this is also like the gray area. Like, who cares? Essentially, I'm sure a listener or viewer will say this, but a Commanders beat reporter was tweeting out that on his plane ride back, even Patriots fans were saying that was a terrible call. What are you calling? That's a sack in 9.5 situations out of 10, 9.9 situations out of 10. Brutal. Luckily for us, it didn't play a role in the Commanders-Patriots outcome, as Washington won the game outright. Now just, a half game back or so in the wild card race. So on to the 4 games we're going to discuss. We got everything. We cleared our palate with our grievances and whatnot from week 9 and on to week 10. But before we do so, remember, if you're planning on betting any NFL week 10 action, first time users with BetMGM Sportsbook can use bonus code The Lines. That's one word, The Lines, to get up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet loses. Remember that bonus bets are not equivalent to real money, and terms and conditions apply as always. For more details, head over to thelines.com. We also have plenty of contests giving away Amazon gift cards for week 10 over at play.thelines.com. They're all free, and you can check out our bets in real time in the Discord channel for NFL, for college basketball. The link is over at thelines.com in the top right-hand corner. For me, for anybody curious, I have my futures guide up for college basketball on thelines.com. My power ratings are also up, and those will be updated on a week-to-week basis. Not going to be betting nearly as much on college basketball as I have in the past. As if you were in a Discord channel, if you weren't, obviously life changes for a lot of people. You get things added onto your plate, and you can't focus as much on your power ratings that go into your bets as you used to. I say that as in the royal you, and for me, that's the case. So we'll see what happens come conference play. But for the time being, futures, and I'll be available on our Discord channel answering questions and all that good stuff. And the link is over at thelines.com in the top right-hand corner, as I mentioned, full of great, and I say this in a positive way, college basketball degenerates. So be sure to check out the Discord for college basketball advice and conversation during games. I'll be in there from time to time. So should be a lot of fun this college basketball season. And I got my features, as I mentioned. The article is pinned on my Twitter account at Eli Herskovich, X Twitter, whatever Elon Musk wants to call it these days. I don't know what to call this Thursday night football game, Steven.
Oh, boy.
Speaking of terrible things like roughing the passer calls that shouldn't be called, and calls on Josh Allen where he clearly was throwing the ball in Gabe Davis's direction. There was just a miscommunication. officiating, freelancers. That goes back to the economy, I guess. But Carolina at Chicago on Thursday Night Football. The Bears are up from a 3.5 point favorite on the look ahead, or 1.5, I should say. Now up to 3.5, minus 110 both ways. Total of 40.5. That's because Justin Fields is expected to return after missing the last 2.5 or so games with that thumb injury. Rest in peace to Chris Collinsworth's take on Sunday Night Football 2 weeks ago that Justin Fields needs to learn from Tyson Bagent during his time on the bench. But what say you for this disgusting handicap?
Is it definitely Justin Fields? That's the first thing I want to ask you. Is it 100% going to be Justin Fields?
That's the expectation.
Okay. If for whatever reason it's not, and it's Bagent again one more time, I am running to the book to try and get this 3.5 on the Panthers, because Bagent can never be 3.5 against anybody. Just want to put that caveat out there first. I know. Just Bryce Young has just been like the change in play caller to the offensive coordinator has done nothing. This is a complete dumpster fire in Carolina. And oh, by the way, now they don't have many picks left to try and fix it because they put them all into Bryce Young. Like if this is not a lesson that sometimes the coaching staff you hire is more important than the quarterback you pick at number one, I don't know what will be. So that, that's the first caveat.
In Reich's defense, maybe he wanted Stroud.
That's a fair point. This might be owner meddling at this point. We don't know. I'd be curious if we get more clarity on that, because it certainly seemed like, we're getting reports that the owner is like having weekly meetings with everybody on the football staff. Like that's not normal. That's not normal at all for an NFL team. So
except if you're the Raiders.
Yeah. Tepper's a new owner in the NFL. He's got his new toy, and it's been a dumpster fire at this point. So they could have just kept Steve Wilkes. Would have been fine. So if it is Bagent, then I'm running to get 3.5, despite how bad Carolina has looked. If it is Justin Fields, it's a stay away from me, Eli. It's an ugly ass game, and I'm just not ever interested. This would be one of two teams where the Bears would be favored by more than a field goal, the other being Arizona if it's Clayton Tune, and I'm just not interested in backing this level of football team to win by more than a field goal.
I'm not interested in backing either of these teams to either cover and keep the game within a field goal or win by more than a field goal. I'm going to find some
non-sports activity to do on Thursday night finally for the first time this season. It seems like a good week to go and, I don't know, go for a jog or see a movie. Or
how do you do that with 2 kids and a newborn?
I can't. I'm just dreaming. I'm just telling you that in a perfect world, Eli, this would be date night for me. Maybe I'll go try and find a babysitter, take the missus out to a lovely dinner on Thursday night, because that seems a lot more entertaining than watching this garbage. That's for damn sure.
We know that's not going to happen.
It's hard to find a babysitter. That is step one. And probably harder to find a babysitter than it is for this total to go over 39.5. That's for sure.
I love it. By the way, with Bryce Young yesterday, the Colts beat Carolina despite putting up 198 yards of offense, and teams with less than 200 yards of total offense were 1-36 since December of 2021. The lone win of that record, or that quote unquote trend, came earlier this season. I'll give you 1 or 2 guesses, if you can, off the top of your head, to guess which win that was.
Oh, God, I don't know.
Okay, that's fair. I wouldn't.
Listen, my wife just got back from a 4-day work trip in California. My brain is mush right now, my friend. I've been a single dad.
Why don't you then go do something on Thursday night and she'll take care of the kids?
Seems logical. Sometimes wives don't think that way, Eli. You'll see. You're engaged.
Oh, I'm there.
You're not there yet. You'll see. You'll see.
I was told I can't eat tuna earlier today, so I'm already there. So the lone win came via the Washington Commanders against the Atlanta Falcons. And you had Atlanta in that one, and I had Washington.
Oh, yeah.
Desmond Ridder is all I'm going to say. So it's similar to Bryce Young because Ridder threw what? 3 interceptions in the game and no pick sixes. But Bryce Young throwing 2 pick sixes yesterday. I want no part of Carolina and Chicago. I'll just tweet about the Bears and hopefully them not covering the point spread. I'll be rooting for Carolina because after working in Chicago sports radio for a while, I hate Chicago sports fans, to put it lightly.
That's not how we grow the audience, Eli, by pissing off the number 3 market in the country.
Oh, I don't care. Let me tell you one thing. I don't care. All right, on to the second game we're going to discuss. Browns at Ravens. You have a bet for this one. Total, another low one, a 38.5. The look at line for this game was around 5.5. So it's been bumped up a bit. Still not, kind of significant, just considering where we're seeing 2-point conversions go these days. First meeting between the two teams, we saw Baltimore outgain Cleveland by 2.8 yards per play in week 4. But granted,
DTR was the quarterback in that game, so
right,
note that.
Right. And 3 Browns turnovers. I believe 1 went all the way back to their own 10-yard line. So Baltimore had a first and goal or something very close to it in the first half. Deshaun Watson yesterday against the Cardinals looked better, but still ranked roughly league average across the board in a bunch of different passing metrics, success rate, EPA per dropback in that shutout victory over Arizona. The Browns defense, though, keep in mind, has allowed 4 of the 7th lowest defensive success rates. That's on the flip side. So the 7 lowest offensive success rates, the Browns have allowed 4 of those this season. And the Ravens, on the flip side of that, are now number 3 in DVOA in terms of the number 3 team ever tracked by that metric through 9 games. I'm going to give myself a pat on the back. I think I was ahead of the market.
You absolutely
on
should.
This Ravens team.
Yep. You're one of the few who were, and you deserve all the credit for that because a lot of us didn't see it with the Ravens, and despite a slow start to the season, you stuck with it, and you were dead right about them.
What am I going to do? Not stick with it? I don't know. I bet on the Ravens the last 2 years, so you got to kind of ride the train or jump off and fall and have a miserable experience after that. But I digress, Stephen. How are you betting this game?
So I bet this first thing Monday morning when it was still 5.5. That number didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Certainly understand that I certainly understand if you want to just take a beat and be careful about betting favorites of this size in divisional matchups. But just looking at the closing lines in recent weeks, the Ravens closed -6 against Seattle. They also played Detroit, another team that all of us here on the line staff has kind of in that same secondary tier. Cleveland, Seattle, Detroit, all kind of in that same tier. Okay, well, the Ravens have played Seattle and Detroit and outscored them 75-9. So if just yesterday they closed -6 at home against Seattle, then -5.5 at home against Cleveland with what I think is a quarterback with a much lower, more volatility than Jared Goff or Geno Smith and Deshaun Watson. That line just didn't make any sense to me. It either implies that the Browns should get a massive upgrade going back to Deshaun Watson, or that we shouldn't be upgrading the Ravens anymore based on another crazy impressive performance against Seattle. So I'm not sure what the right line in this game is, but I'm not sure it should be 5.5 or 6, as crazy as that sounds. Just looking at our power rankings this week across the line staff for those that have been able to get them in so far.
Is that a shot?
Almost unanimously, we have the Ravens as the number 3 team in the NFL at this point, and Nate Weitzer has them at number 2. So if that's the case, then they should be in that same tier with the Eagles and the 49ers and maybe just a tab below the Chiefs. And I'm not sure that those teams would only be 5.5 or 6 against the Browns. Would you agree with that?
It's a fair assertion, especially with Cleveland's offensive line injuries. Not only you're going to be without Conklin on the right side, he's been out from since week 1 or around that juncture, and then no Jedrick Wills either, who has underperformed this year at left tackle, but he was placed on injured reserve earlier this morning, again on Monday. So it looks like it's going to be, unless Cleveland does something, brings in somebody off the streets, James Hudson III, who ranks below average and then some at his position in terms of left tackle grades this season. And mind you, too, Baltimore's blitz rate ranks roughly league average, but the pass rush efficiency is up since Owe has returned, I think after week 4, week 5, and he's their best edge rusher, which you may say to that statement that, okay, then Baltimore doesn't have great pass rushers, but I mean, he has a lot of potential. I know you kind of shot him down before that Lions game, and maybe you feel differently about him.
He's a young player who has room to improve, that's for sure.
Yeah, he has a really good pass rushing grade this season across a bunch of different analytics sites. So I'm pretty high on this Ravens defense, especially at the linebacker position. Offense needs to get sorted out still.
Lamar's in the MVP crazy conversation. Though, Eli? Like the offense still needs to be sorted out, and they've beaten Seattle and Detroit by a combined score of 75-9. What is the ceiling on this team?
And I say that with maybe a little bit of like devil's advocate, just because, like I said, I'm on Baltimore Super Bowl futures 25-1 going back to May. I'm high on this team from the get-go and going back to the preseason even. But again, devil's advocate, neither of those games came on the road. We haven't seen this team face an ultra negative game script yet. So it's kind of similar to Kansas City, right? And we can go back to the Chiefs game. Yeah.
Going back, I guess you could say the Pittsburgh game was a bit of a negative game script with just how unlucky
Not really.
they were. Yeah, I mean, they had to come back at the very end, but for the most part, it was mostly neutral the entire time.
Right. They were up for a lot of that game too.
Yeah, I guess my argument would be to the people who want to take the points with Cleveland. If you're that high on the Cleveland defense, then you should at least also acknowledge that the Ravens defense, when you filter out garbage time, is actually second in the NFL in EPA per play allowed, ahead of the Browns at number 3, and almost identical in success rate allowed with the Browns defense as well. So if you are in love with the Browns defense, despite red flags with their offense and their quarterback, then you better give Baltimore's defense credit too at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty stagnant and pretty impressive, and then some, just because the Ravens don't have an elite defensive line. Like, this isn't like if you go back to those elite Ravens defenses that had the likes of Terrell Suggs on it, they don't have an elite pass rusher in their front four, like front 3, front 4. If you look at like Broderick Washington, Michael Pierce, who's actually outperformed expectations, but outside of Owe, like Clowney is kind of underperformed what I thought, even though he got signed off the street in August. Roquan Smith is an elite linebacker, and Queen's playing up to par too. And then in the secondary, still don't have Marcus Williams back yet. I mean, if you kind of have the luxury at this point to get him healthy, although I really hope Baltimore gets the 1 seed in the AFC. But still, with this schedule, they could probably rest him up. And you have depth there at safety with Geno Stone, who's played really well at that position, even going back to week 2 against kind of an unhealthy, that's kind of an understatement too, Joe Burrow at Cincinnati, but had that interception, has really good instincts. Kyle Hamilton, one of the better safeties across the NFL in his second or third season. And Brandon Stevens has held up really well at the other outside cornerback position, with Marlon Humphrey getting healthier and healthier. All pro going back to the last 3 or 4 years when he's healthy. So yeah, I'm bullish on this Ravens defense overall, to say the least. We'll see if the offense catches up, kind of like Kansas City. And Chiefs got their fair share of breaks. I don't know if Tyreek Hill actually caught that ball on the defensive touchdown to end the half. What was your quick opinion of that play?
Which play? Sorry.
The Tyreek Hill fumble turn defensive touchdown for Kansas City at the end of the first half of Kansas City and Miami.
I was confused why they didn't call forward progress not being stopped. First of all. And yeah, I mean, lucky break, right? For the Chiefs. The Chiefs offense still has some work to do. That's for sure. So without that play, what happens in that game? The Chiefs have very much been relying on their defense, and I don't think that they are some juggernaut like we've seen in past years, but they are still clearly the team to beat, that's for sure. But I don't think the gap between them and the other teams in the AFC is as wide as it has been in recent years. So at this juncture, taking health into account, I would say that it's probably the Ravens and the Bengals who have the best shot to knock them off in the AFC. And those two teams actually happen to play each other next week. And I can't wait to hear you and Mo talk about it next week, because Bengals-Ravens on Thursday Night Football in Week 11. That's going to be awesome.
Yeah, curious to see what the line is for that game for sure. San Francisco at Jacksonville, another AFC contender. I know you have some futures on the Jags. 49ers, a 3-point favorite. That line up from the look ahead of 2.5, total of 45. Two significant-ish pieces to discuss. Additions on both sides. Chase Young added to the 49ers defensive line. San Francisco already with the 7th rated pressure rate across the league. And then the Jags adding some reinforcements on their offensive line. Ezra Cleveland getting him in a trade from Minnesota ahead of the trade deadline. And Jacksonville entering, I believe, Week 9 had the 2nd worst pass block win rate. So that's significant out of this game with going up against one of the better defensive fronts in the NFL, although they struggle to generate pressure against a much healthier Joe Burrow back in Week 8. That was their 3rd straight loss heading into the bye. So both teams coming off the bye, able to implement their new pieces, although it didn't really matter for Minnesota yesterday against Atlanta. Josh Dobbs had 0 practice reps, goes into the game cold, and not only covers, but wins outright. Pretty wild result. But how are you handicapping San Francisco and Jacksonville, Steven?
Simply put, really just kind of a buy low bet for me on the 49ers. Bet this at -2.5 with -115 on the juice Monday morning. We're up to 3 now, a flat 3 for the 49ers. So again, another reason why everybody listening should be in our Discord channel. Just go to thelines.com, top right-hand corner, hit the Discord icon, and you can get in there and see when our entire staff is making their bets at any given point to try and get the best of the number. I didn't think for a second that had any chance of closing at 2.5. And I think it's for 2 reasons. Number one, the 49ers losing streak, 3 straight games here, has been very much about health, in my opinion. They haven't had Deebo Samuel. Trent Williams has been banged up, their left tackle as well. When you take those guys away, Brock Purdy's going to get pressured. He wound up potentially playing half a game concussed in this stretch. And despite a scoreboard that looks like a blowout against Cincinnati with a final score of 31-17, the 49ers moved the ball in that game exceptionally well, even without Deebo Samuel. The Niners had 8.2 yards per play in that game. And I certainly acknowledge the turnover-worthy plays are an issue with Brock Purdy being a young quarterback, but with all of their pieces assembled, I still rank this team as one of the 2 best in the NFL. And I think all of their pieces will again be assembled this week, coming off the bye week against Jacksonville. Now, you're right. I do have some futures that I put in on Jacksonville coming into the season. But they were bet before any games were played. And despite the fact that the Jaguars are 6-2 right now, going into week number 10, I think that record is a little inflated based on the schedule that they've played. They caught the one impressive win in this 5-game winning streak the Jags are on was against Buffalo in London with an unprecedented spot where they actually got to stay in London for an extra week and the Bills had to come over and they win that game. The other opponents they've won in that stretch, Atlanta, Indianapolis, New Orleans, and Pittsburgh. Not exactly the elites of the NFL. So to me, I I almost have the Jags ranked inside the top 10 of my power rankings this week by default, because it's really hard to find any other teams that are worthy of the top 10 in the NFL. But I don't think that they are even in the second tier of NFL teams. Maybe the Detroits and the, I don't know, Baltimore's, Seattle's, maybe Seattle. But I think to make this 2.5, you really have to put the Niners back down a tier, and I don't buy that when they're fully healthy. So this is kind of a buy low for me, and we'll see how it works out here. But I still think the Jags have some stuff to work out here on offense. I have not been impressed with their offense, and I think their defense, although greatly improved and impressive, is a bit of product of their schedule, and this is a whole nother ball game when you're facing the 49ers offense.
A couple of concerns for me with San Francisco, especially with this number up to the key number 3, and I do want to get back to your bet in a second, but the 49ers, in order to negate, even with a healthier offense, if Williams and Debo are back this week, in order to negate some of those turnover-worthy throws, you have to run the football efficiently. And Jacksonville is allowing the lowest rushing success rate across the NFL. Jacksonville ranks top 15, or top 16, so above league average in opponents' EPA per carry. The success rate is obviously more of like a down and distance kind of thing, which you're not allowing a lot of explosive plays if you're not allowing teams to get like 50% of the yards on first down and 100% on third and fourth down, that kind of thing. So if San Francisco can't run the ball efficiently, it's going to be an issue. And putting the ball in Purdy's hands and more turnover-worthy opportunities. And then on the flip side, I also wonder, just big picture, how much of a step back San Francisco's defense has taken with the loss of D'Amico Ryans going to Steve Wilks. You mentioned Wilks earlier when we were touching on the Carolina Panthers. And that's not me throwing this losing streak into a small sample size and trying to come up with a hot take in a vacuum because of it. The NFC is wide open, going back to the point that you brought up earlier on in the podcast. So I'm not saying that I'm downgrading San Francisco a ton off of these losses, but I think those are viable concerns. One, in this game in particular, and then two, big picture.
So for me, just let's look specifically at these losses that the 49ers have had. I can kind of shoot holes in all three of them. The first was a crazy wind game in Cleveland. That they played over 10 times, they probably win it 8 times with the way the circumstances have played out, with PJ Walker turning it over and wind and a missed field goal because of the wind. Still didn't perform great, obviously, but all right. So next game, Minnesota had a play that probably should have been an interception. Instead, it was caught and taken 60 yards to the house. They also had a McCaffrey turnover inside the red zone, and would have been a goal-to-go situation if he didn't fumble it. So probably should have won that game too. And then we also mentioned that they had more than 8 yards per play against Cincinnati. So, a lot of this, it really is about Brock Purdy turning the ball over in those games. And perhaps that continues. He's a young quarterback. He's a 7th-round pick. He didn't have the pedigree. This is a system quarterback situation where he needs to just do what's asked of him. But it's a lot easier for him to do that when they're fully assembled offensively and healthy versus when they had to throw 12 targets to Jawan Jennings and Ray McLeod combined. It's different now. So I hear your points, certainly understand the metrics, and I'm curious to see if I have this strong of opinion still towards the end of the week when I actually dig into the metrics. But for me, over the past few years, when the 49ers get in a game where they are favored by less than a field goal, I almost just take it automatically. So, but I will report back on the Megapod on Friday after I dig into the actual numbers and tell you whether or not I feel as confident then as I do right now.
And looking at the current point spreads, pretty much it is all threes across the board. So
Yeah, I wouldn't
stay
bet
away
it
for you
three.
at this point.
I would
at 3?
not bet 3 on the road with the Niners. Like it's a little rich for me. We all know 3 is the most key number of all in the NFL. So it was really just getting below and getting a great number at 2.5. I would probably just stay away at 3 at this point, but we'll see if there's any interest in the Jags in the middle of the week here to move this back to 2.5.
Fourth and final game we're going to discuss before very quick, rapid fire Monday Night Football discussion for those of you listening to this on or watching this on Monday. Texans at Bengals. Bengals a 7-point favorite across the board, total of 47.5, and that total has been bumped up from 45.5. So a lot of interest in the over. Kind of going back to the conversation we were having with Bengals Bills and all the points that were left on the board and that Sunday Night Football game. Joe Burrow has gone from negative 0.09 EPA per play in weeks 1 through 6 to plus 0.37 EPA per play the last 2 weeks, going up against a Texans pass defense that is very vulnerable. As we saw yesterday, Baker Mayfield putting up 7.8 yards per attempt. Outside of Steven Nelson, corners are pretty susceptible, especially former Jags defensive back Shaq Griffin, who's taken a big step back over the last couple of years. And then Cincinnati on the flip side, you brought this up with the 49ers offensive efficiency going back to their Week 8 game. The Bengals allowing the 6th highest passing success rate across the NFL. Even though Awuzie looks healthier, if Kincaid doesn't fumble inside the 20-yard line, 25-yard line on Sunday night, could have been looking at a
very big swing.
Huge swing, especially because Buffalo's defense adjusted going into the half. And now you're going up against CJ Stroud, who put up a big number. So I'm not even, this could be a letdown spot for Cincinnati. I need to dig into the numbers. That's an initial angle for me on the spread, but on the surface, the adjustment with the total makes a ton of sense.
I completely agree on that. The defenses continue to struggle. I mean, when you give up a 30 spot to Tampa Bay and Baker Mayfield, that's something's fundamentally off with your defense for Houston. And the one concern I had with my Bengals bet on Sunday night against the Bills was the Bengals defense, because they still, they were healthy. They weren't banged up like Burrow was, and they were still giving up a ton of yardage and points. And they feasted off the turnovers with Purdy. To give up 8 yards per play against Cincinnati was against the 49ers was rough. So I thought Josh Allen would move the ball, and he did, and they just had some variance go against them. But I think ton of points in this one for sure. And my initial reaction was more than 7 was too much based on the Cincinnati defense and the level of play we've seen from them. And sure enough, the market agreed with that, and we're back down to the key number of 7. So I would be surprised if we see 7.5 the rest of the week. But if we do, then I'm probably teasing the Bengals down. I'm not sure what you would like better, Eli. Would you prefer just taking Texans at 7.5 or better straight up? Or, and I'm not saying you're going to bet this, or just right now, if you had to pick, would you prefer taking Texans plus 7.5 or teasing the Bengals down?
You already know my answer.
Yeah, you hate teasers.
And I'm the situational spot. If the numbers dictate it, I need to dive more into this matchup, but it's a good spot for Houston, even after that all-out effort against Tampa Bay, and says more about the defense. Also says a lot about Stroud, and bouncing back after that pretty abysmal performance at Carolina, just considering the injuries that the Panthers have on that side of the ball. But yeah, if I had to bet the game right now, I would even take the 7. If I had to bet the game, that doesn't mean I'm betting it, but
yeah, makes sense.
Bengals
to me. I thought yesterday was more of what we should expect from the Texans than what they did, only scoring 13 points against Carolina. I thought that was a one-off. I have a lot of faith in this offense moving forward for the Texans.
That's going to do it for this edition of Beat the Closing Number. For Steven Andres, you can follow him on Twitter at I always get it confused. Andres or Andres?
It's Andres, but I like when you say Andres because it makes me feel exotic.
Well, thank you for. Yeah, I've said it both ways. So
you're not.
I'm gonna say
you are not the first, and you won't be the last to try and make me Latin American. So I appreciate it.
Any last words before we get out of here, Steven? Something?
Yeah, to the person who took at Steven Andrus on Twitter, I want it back. Some Russian bot took my original username, and now I have to put a number 1 on the end of it. But other than that, best of luck, everybody, with your bets.
It differentiates you from the rest of the pack.
Sure. Thanks, Elon.
Steven Andrus won on X, Twitter, whatever Elon Musk wants to call it. I'm at Eli Herskovich. You can follow the Lines on Twitter at the Lines US. And remember, if you're betting any NFL action across the board, use first-time promo code The Lines if you're a first-time user with BetMGM Sportsbook to get up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet loses. Remember that bonus bets are not equivalent to real money. And as always, terms and conditions apply. For more details, head over to play.thelines.com. You can check out the Lines Discord channel to get our bets in real time and to get notifications on your mobile device. I think it's only mobile. You can subscribe in the Rules channel on Discord. Again, the link is over at thelines.com. Thanks for watching and listening to another edition of Beat the Closing Number. So long, everybody.